Hello, welcome to another snowy day in Walden, and I have a cozy book to read to you about kindness. I'm wearing my funny hat. You'll see why in the book. And the scarf my daughter made me. I love it. I use it all the time, not every day, but all the time. And there's nothing better than a homemade gift. I love when my children make me things. So I'm going to read the book. I'm going to show you briefly a little craft that you can do, and you can either just do it at home or you can come and get supplies for it here at the library. Okay. A Hat from Mrs. Goldman, a story about knitting and love by Michelle Edwards and Brian G. Karras. And it is published by a Junior Library Guild, oh, no, that's not it, sorry, Schwartz and Wade Books, New York. A Hat from Mrs. Goldman. When Sophia was a tiny baby, Mrs. Goldman next door knit her a tiny baby hat to keep her warm. Now Sophia is big, and she makes pom-poms for Mrs. Goldman's hats. Hats for the tiniest babies, hats for small, medium, and large friends and neighbors. Mrs. Goldman taught her how. Keeping Keppies warm is our mitzvah, said Mrs. Goldman, kissing her on top of the head. This is your kepi, and a mitzvah is a good deed. Oh, sorry. Sophia and Mrs. Goldman bundle up to walk Mrs. Goldman's dog Fifi. Winter is almost here. Fifi wears her dinosaur sweater. Sophia wears her fuzzy kitten hat and matching mittens. Mrs. Goldman made them all. An icy wind blows Mrs. Goldman's hair left and right. It turns her ears pink. Where's your hat? asked Sophia. Oh, I gave it to Mrs. Chen, she explains. Mrs. Goldman's kepi must be cold, worries Sophia. At home, Sophia thinks and worries again, worries and thinks. Mrs. Goldman needs a hat. Who will knit one for her? Not Mrs. Goldman. She's too busy knitting hats for everyone else. Last year, Mrs. Goldman taught Sophia how to knit. I only like making pom-poms, Sophia decided after a few days. Knitting is hard, and it takes too long. So if you've ever knit or crocheted, it's very hard to make your fingers do what they're supposed to do when you're doing this, and you get things tight, and it's really hard to get started. Now Sophia digs out her knitting bag Mrs. Goldman gave her, and the hat they started. The stitches are straight and even. The soft wool, smells like Mrs. Goldman's chicken soup. Sophia holds the needles and tries to remember what to do. She drops one stitch. She drops another. Still, Sophia knits on. She wants to make Mrs. Goldman the most special hat in the world. The next day, when Sophia and Mrs. Goldman walk Fifi, tiny tufts of snow fall on Mrs. Goldman's head. Her ears are bright red. Mrs. Goldman's kepi must be very cold, frets Sophia. Sophia knits after breakfast. She knits after lunch. She knits after dinner. She knits even while Mama reads her a bedtime story. But Sophia doesn't knit when she is at Mrs. Goldman's house. The hat is a surprise. All week there's frost on the windows. One day, when they are walking Fifi, Mrs. Goldman wraps Mr. Goldman's scarf around her head like she's a mummy. A fierce wind unwraps it and flings it up high. Sophia jumps and grabs it at the end of the scarf. Fifi nips at the other end. Mrs. Goldman's kepi must be freezing, shivers Sophia. I love that name, Sophia. Sophia knits and knits and knits, faster and faster and faster, stitch by stitch, row by row. Then Sophia sews, and at last Mrs. Goldman's hat is done. She's very happy, sort of. The hat is lumpy and bumpy. There are holes where there shouldn't be holes. It looks like a monster hat, thinks Sophia. Sophia turns the hat over and around, inside out. Mrs. Goldman's hat should not be a monster hat. That will scare Fifi. I can hear my dog too. Oh! Sophia opens the box of hats Mrs. Goldman made for her. Each one is special, but they are all too small for Sophia now, and way too small for Mrs. Goldman. Sophia looks in the hall closet. There are hats Mrs. Goldman made for Mama and Papa, but she can't give her their hats. There's a scratchy old hat Sophia's abuela wore back in Mexico. Worse than Mr. Goldman's scarf. Sophia thinks about Mrs. Goldman and the hats they made together. Your pom-poms add beauty, Mrs. Goldman always told her, and that's a mitzvah too. Sophia feels her heart grow bigger and lighter, like a balloon. Do you think she has an idea? She searches her room for red yarn. Red is Mrs. Goldman's favorite color. She gathers her scissors, her sewing needle, and her stack of index cards. Sophia gets very busy. Very busy. I think I just read that wrong, but that's okay. I love that picture. Her working away. Oops. When Sophia is done, Mrs. Goldman's hat is the most special hat in the world. Sophia rushes next door. Oops. Surprise! For me? Asked Mrs. Goldman. For you, answers Sophia. It's a hat, she says. Of course it is, exclaims Mrs. Goldman, and she hugs Sophia, and then she cries. What's wrong? Asks Sophia. Don't you like it? I more than like it. I love it, declares Mrs. Goldman. Gorgeous, like Mr. Goldman's rose bushes. And you know how I love his roses. Mrs. Goldman kisses Sophia on top of her kepi. I made it all by myself, Sophia tells her. Amazing. And you will look at will you look at all the pom-poms? 1, 2, 3, 4, counts Mrs. Goldman. Sophia joins in. There are 20 pom-poms on Mrs. Goldman's hat, each one made with love. She gently puts it on. The next day, Sophia and Mrs. Goldman walk Fifi. Fifi wears her dinosaur sweater. Sophia wears her fuzzy kitten hat and matching mittens. And Mrs. Goldman wears her Sophia hat. Her kepi is toasty warm. And that's a mitzvah. How kind is that? Think of something kind you can do for someone today. And then it tells you how to make a Sophia hat. Now mine is not made the correct like this, and I don't have enough pom-poms, but maybe one day I'll add more. But they tell you how to do that at the end of the book. And so if you want to make a pom-pom, I do have things, here at the library for you. And I have a paper of 2 different ways that you can make the pom-poms. So I will have all of this stuff available for you, except for the scissors, of course. But we have all different colors of yarn. That's not all of it. We have lots and lots. You can let me know what you want. You can make it 2 colors. And I just wanted to show you. I have a pom-pom, pom-pom here and on my wrist.